Hello, so good to see you again. Welcome back to this week's episode of Closed by Mo. My name is Mohammed. I'm hopefully your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate. I'm also a real estate investor and a broker based out of New York City and Long Island as well. In this week's episode, we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit more about something on the commercial real estate side of things, which is what we call the continuous operation provision. I have done a couple of commercial leases in the past. It is something that I am trying to get more active in. So I figured this would be a great segue to talk about one of the probably most important clause that I've seen in a commercial lease, especially with all the different provisions that you'll hear about, and I've made a few videos on my social media about this as well. The continuous operation provision is really important not just for landlords, but also for tenants to consider before you sign on any commercial space. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. Now, the continuous operation provision or the continuous operation clause is basically a clause that allows the landlord to ensure that the tenant is making best use of their space, aka that the tenant is operating during mostly regular business hours. It's basically a stipulation in the commercial lease that will require the business to, or the tenant, the commercial tenant that runs the business, to have a certain amount of business activity. It doesn't necessarily always mean that it has to be like a 9 to 5 operating hours, but it just basically means that, hey, if the tenant has a lease in the space that's owned by the landlord, the tenant has to make sure that the store is at least open or active for a set number of hours or a set number of time throughout the year. Obviously, these are, factor in things like operating hours as well as seasonal considerations. So if it's like an ice cream store, it's not going to be super active in the winter, especially if you're in colder areas like in the Northeast. And it also definitely has to comply with, local laws and regulations about when a certain business may or may not operate, right? Now, a couple of considerations for the landlord and why the continuous operation clause is so important for you, because if you own a space, if you own a commercial building, the market value of that property is not just derived from the overall condition of the property, but it's also derived mainly from the activity that the business is going to be generating, or the building is going to be generating. So it's not just, again, the condition of the property, the numbers in this place, it's also the perceived value of the property. Take, for example, two shopping malls. If one, if they're both getting paid on the exact same amount, the numbers themselves are breaking down the exact same, and they might even have the exact same tenants. Just a hypothetical example. Which shopping center do you think is going to be worth more, is going to seem more attractive? The shopping center that has all the stores that are operating at irregular hours and some stores that are just closed 24/7, and the business owner won the lottery and is still paying the landlord their rent? Or the shopping mall where the store has predictable open hours, all the different stores sort of coordinate, the mall has certain open hours. You as a consumer know that when you go into a store at a specific time, you know what to expect in terms of what stores are going to be open and whatnot. Obviously, the second shopping center is going to be worth more to you, not just as a consumer, but also as an investor when you're comparing these two different shopping centers, if you were to purchase or sell it, or maybe even analyze the leases themselves. So of course, it's not just to protect the vitality of the property, just how lively it is and how much foot traffic it's getting, but also the property value, right? So if you realize that your shopping center has irregular open hours because all the stores are operating on their own different time schedules, or some of the owners are just not showing up to open the business because they won the lottery, whatever it is, that's going to affect the overall vitality of your real estate, and ergo the end valuation of the property itself. So for you as a landlord, it's a way to safeguard the overall property value. And of course, one of the more important things, it's also a way for you to avoid any vacancies or any perceived vacancies. If a buyer or interested party is driving by and they see that the shopping mall is completely empty, or the building has got all the stores shuttered, but you're showing that all the stores are leased out and the payments are being made, that's not going to really indicate that this kind of asset is a high value asset. Now, in terms of the importance for tenants, obviously you have to consider how flexible the landlord may or may not be for your flexibility of your business's open hours. Maybe you're a night owl, or you're running a bar or some kind of a club that's only open during specific times. You want to make sure that is noted within the commercial lease, within the continuous operation provision, to make sure the landlord can't turn around and say, hey, you're not operating at regular business hours, we're going to terminate this lease because you're not meeting the continuous operation clause of the lease itself. Other factors to think about, obviously, is the fact that the continuous operation clause is a negotiation point. There's also obviously compliance considerations to keep, because you have to make sure that you're abiding by the rules of the area or anything that is local to your specific neighborhood that are outlined in maybe county laws, neighborhood laws, things like that. But you can factor all those in the continuous operation provision when you're negotiating the overall commercial lease. So let's say, for example, the landlord says, hey, I want you to sign this lease, and this is the lease that we agreed upon, but the continuous operation provision that I'm going to put in there has to state that you're going to keep the store open and active from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. you as the tenant might think, okay, well, I know I can work or I can be available or have an employee there from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. because that's when I see most of my foot traffic, and keeping it open before or after then just doesn't make any sense. That is a negotiation point between you and the landlord to make sure you find some kind of some kind of balance there. With that, guys, I hope you sort of have a good understanding of what the continuous operation provision or continuous operation clause is, because it's really important for businesses that might not necessarily need to operate on regular business hours. Maybe you're working on like a project by project basis and you're having a couple of slow months and you think, okay, I can keep my store shut down so I can save on utilities, bills, whatever it is, assuming you're only making the base rental payment. That might not be something that you're actually allowed to do, especially if your landlord's smart enough to know that, hey, if I can show that my shopping plaza or my building or my real estate is more active, there's a lot of foot traffic, that's going to help the landlord's property valuation. Ergo, the landlord's going to be very specific about making sure they include a continuous operation provision, because that means if you're not abiding by the continuous operation provision, guess what? You're in default of the lease, and the landlord can terminate that lease and possibly evict you. With that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you guys next week. Bye-bye now.